It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. Northern Ireland prepares for a Sinn Fein First Minister after a power-sharing deal is agreed.
This is what goes to the heart of the Good Friday Agreement. Power sharing is the only show in town. So I'm finally glad that we're getting to a juncture where actually that may be possible once again.
The new deal should mean goods will flow freely into Northern Ireland, with details expected tomorrow. Also tonight, we travel to the area near Tower 22, where 3 US soldiers were killed, as Joe Biden says he knows how he'll respond to the attack. Video shows the moment Israeli military dressed as civilians and doctors raid a hospital in the West Bank, killing people it says were militants planning an attack. A warning to the Chancellor from the International Monetary Fund not to cut taxes. And is it the age of the cyborg as Elon Musk's company Neuralink plants a chip into someone's brain? We test out how the technology works. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's coming up in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Hello there, good evening. After 2 years of deadlock, a deal has been reached in Northern Ireland to restore the power-sharing government. The issue was over border checks on goods and services, and after overnight talks, an announcement came that a post-Brexit trade agreement had been reached, but not before details of the overnight meeting were leaked to the media. Well, today there's been widespread praise for the deal. The Westminster Secretary of State, Chris Heaton-Harris, said all conditions are now in place to return the Assembly, but refused to be drawn on the detail. We'll get more on that in a moment. First, let's hear from Sky's senior Ireland correspondent, David Blevins, reporting from Stormont.
They arrived in 2 cars, but they're now preparing to form one government. The DUP leader's deal to restore power sharing has paved the way for Michelle O'Neill to become Northern Ireland's first nationalist First Minister.
I welcome that. That's exactly where we all should be. This is what goes to the heart of the Good Friday Agreement. Power sharing is the only show in town. So I'm finally glad that we're getting to a juncture where actually that may be possible once again. But then it's about beyond that. What do we do next?
It's a defining moment for unionism, holding out the prospect of devolution within days. Sir Geoffrey Donaldson says the UK government will table legislation addressing his concerns about the Brexit border in the Irish Sea.
Some people said you're going to take the green lane and paint it red, white and blue and put a flag on it. Well, if someone wants to put a flag on it, whatever. But as far as we are concerned, the green lane will go and be replaced by the UK internal market system.
Sir Geoffrey Donaldson says this deal means there will be 0 checks on goods coming from Great Britain to Northern Ireland and remaining here, and that EU law will no longer apply automatically in this part of the United Kingdom. But those claims will be tested against the legislation once it's published. The breakthrough came after 5 hours of talks on a night of high drama for the DUP. Protests outside overshadowed by a leak from inside. Jamie Bryson, a loyalist activist, posted a running commentary online from a source attending the meeting. How did you breach the security of the DUP?
Well, I didn't. I think the DUP breached their own security, I have to say.
There is some suggestion that someone in that meeting was wearing a wire. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I wouldn't ask you who your sources are, how you obtain them.
The Northern Ireland Secretary briefed the Cabinet but hasn't released the details yet. He had already pledged £3.3 billion of support to any new Stormont administration.
I believe that all the conditions are now in place for the Assembly to return, and I look forward very much to the restoration of the institutions at Stormont as soon as possible.
2 years without a government here has fuelled a crisis in Northern Ireland's public services. 10 days ago, 170,000 workers took to the streets to demand a pay rise. Marie Irwin was one of them.
The morale in Northern Ireland has hugely suffered. It has been hugely impacted. People have no belief in our government anymore. People are sad, and I think mental health levels have risen hugely in this small country, and I do think that that has a direct impact to us not having a government up and running.
Endless talk about borders only adds to the challenge of power sharing. But if this deal sticks, Northern Ireland could have a new government by the weekend. And it's Rishi Sunak who'll have got Brexit done. David Blevins, Sky News at Stormont.
Well, let's take a look then at how this saga has all unfolded. And you have to go back to January the 1st, 2021, when Brexit meant the Northern Ireland Protocol came into effect, intended to prevent a hard border on the island of Ireland. The following year, in February, the DUP First Minister, Paul Givan, resigned in protest over the protocol, collapsing the power-sharing government. The last elections for the Northern Ireland Assembly were in May 2022. The nationalist Sinn Fein became the largest party in Northern Ireland for the first time, and its Vice Chair Michelle O'Neill was elected First Minister designate. Days later, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson said he would refuse to nominate ministers to Stormont and would block any new power-sharing arrangement unless the Northern Ireland Protocol was changed, beginning an impasse that has lasted ever since. Well, progress was made last year after Rishi Sunak agreed the Windsor framework with the EU. That adjusted the Northern Ireland Protocol to address some unionist political concerns. And today's announcement signals that after 725 days, a power-sharing government could soon return to Stormont. Let's bring in our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, bringing the prospect, Sam, of a nationalist Sinn Féin leader at Stormont for the first time. But it's all about the details of the deal now coming tomorrow, we understand.
That's right, Anna. We are on the cusp of a massive moment for the people of Northern Ireland who've been without an elected government for almost 2 years, but I think the implications run beyond that, as you hinted in your question. First of all, for this deal to work, having looked at it all day, it's got to have involved, if it is as the DUP claim and as the government hint, it's got to have involved the EU backing down. The EU not demanding the kind of checks on goods going from Great Britain to Northern Ireland that they were absolutely adamant a year ago that were necessary. And because of that, I think it's going to be really important to look at the fine print that's not published till tomorrow. We've had lots of people signing up to a deal today, but we haven't actually seen what's in it tomorrow. Is that right? And what's the quid pro quo? We just don't know. Then there's the money, £3.3 billion. That could have bought a lot of marginal seats, one Tory MP said to me this evening. Further implications by the way that Rishi Sunak's going to rewrite the formula that decides how funding is distributed across the United Kingdom to the various nations. That is going to have long-lasting implications. A lot of people would have wanted a bit of that kind of cash. And then finally, Anna, perhaps the biggest thing of all, if this deal goes ahead, as you were saying in the question, we are finally going to have a Sinn Féin First Minister, the whole Northern Ireland Assembly, set up to try and block anyone other than unionists taking the top job. But maybe as soon as next week, the top representative in Northern Ireland of a party that's long associated with the IRA, that believes in the breakup of the United Kingdom and the reunification of the island of Ireland. Everybody knows that the deal done today was generous by Rishi Sunak because it was about his legacy. The question is whether it's the legacy that he will really want in a decade or two's time.
Sam Coates in Downing Street. Thank you. The US President Joe Biden has said he has now decided on a response after a drone attack which killed 3 US soldiers at a base in Jordan. And tonight, Iraq's Kataib Hezbollah, an Iran-aligned group which the Pentagon said had carried out the assault, said it had suspended all military operations against US troops in the region. Well, the 3 soldiers were killed and dozens wounded in northeast Jordan, near the border with Syria on Sunday. The drone struck a base known as Tower 22. The air defence system had reportedly been switched off to allow an American drone to return. Our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, reports now from the town of Ruwenshed, near the nearest Jordanian town to the base.
You can't see or hear it, but out in all that vast emptiness, there is a war underway, and it is now escalating. On Jordan's borders with Iraq and Syria, US-based Tower 22 is the epicentre of rising tensions, after 3 American soldiers were killed in a drone attack blamed on Iranian-backed militia. In the nearest town, people are worried that a conflict that began in Gaza may soon spread.
الوضع يعني بشكل عام The situation generally is not stable as long as there is a war in Gaza, and the same for the whole of the Middle East and in Western countries.
The Gaza war is unfair. It's killing children, killing women, and there's no justice. We'd lose everything. We'd lose hope if the war spreads across the region.
We're about as close as we can get to Tower 22 here, given that it is a closed military zone. But across the deserts of Jordan, Syria and Iraq, there are many such American bases that have come under increasing number of attacks since the beginning of the Gaza war by Iranian-backed militia. Joe Biden's challenge is to take action that is strong enough to deter any more of those attacks, but not so severe that it tips the region into a much bigger war.
US reprisals now seem imminent. After President Biden was asked, has he decided how he'll respond to the attack?
Yes.
And he was asked, does he hold Iran responsible?
I do hold them responsible in the sense that they're supplying the weapons to the people who did it.
It may well be the most consequential decision of his presidency. A huge amount is at stake.
في التصنيف الأمريكي بالإرهاب فهو مضحك.
America's enemies and Iran's allies across the Middle East are watching. In Yemen, issuing more defiant propaganda videos, Houthi rebels are not backing down, despite US-British airstrikes. And Lebanon's Iranian-backed Hezbollah militia keep up their dangerous brinkmanship with Israel. Experts say the danger is America's response only encourages its enemies to up the ante too.
These militia, like Hezbollah's militia or IRGC militia in this area, just waiting when and how this next strikes will happen in the region. And then they are coming to a next level of the escalation from their side against the Americans. We expect that very well.
Across the Middle East, they are holding their breath, awaiting America's next move. Dominic Waghorn, Sky News, Rowesha, Jordan.
So what then are the options for the United States and how might President Biden retaliate? Our data and forensics correspondent Tom Cheshire has been looking at the chances of a significant escalation.
The US President Joe Biden says he has decided on a response, even if we don't know what. The problem is the US has already been responding to attack after attack on its bases in the Middle East, and still they keep coming. There have been more than 160 strikes on US bases since the Israel-Hamas war started, according to the US Department of Defense. And this shows a section of those attacks that have been independently verified by ACLED, the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project. There have been injuries to US military personnel before this, but Tower 22 base in Jordan, close to Syria, was the first to result in deaths. And the US blamed militias backed by Iran for the attacks. Iran said it had nothing to do with them and doesn't want the conflict to escalate. And this shows how the US has been retaliating since October the 27th. It's already been escalating against bases not only operated by the Islamic Resistance in Iraq, or IRI, that's the umbrella term for different militias backed by Iran, but also against bases already operated by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard themselves.
I'm fairly sure that the Americans will go for sanctions. That'd be an obvious thing to do, and I'm pretty sure they'll go for attacks on Republican Guard bases in Syria and Iraq, and also IRI bases. They'll certainly, I think, produce more attacks there. They might also go for cyber, but we'll see about that. I doubt if they'll immediately go for attacks on Iranian warships in the Gulf of Aden, but that's certainly a possibility.
This is what it might look like, that possibility. Iran has various vessels in the area. You've got the Revolutionary Guards up here, fast boats operating, which have seized tankers in the past. There's also this ship, the Beshad. Officially, it carries cargo, but military analysts say it actually carries out surveillance that has been vital for all those Houthi attacks on shipping. And early in January, Iran announced that Al-Borz, a frigate, had entered the Red Sea. Those would be Iranian assets, but they're still outside Iran. Further up the escalation ladder would be an attack on Iranian territory itself. That's at the top of the ladder. The US wouldn't start there, if only to give itself room to climb up in the future. Those actions we talked about lower down could come sooner, maintaining some surprise, but leaving tougher options open. Biden has said we don't need a wider war in the Middle East. Others would argue that, with the death of US military personnel, the wider war is already here. And the US response to date has failed to contain it.
Our US correspondent Mark Stone is in Washington for us. So a response decided by Joe Biden, Mark, but now the group believed to be behind the attack has suspended operations. Will there have to be a rethink from the White House?
Well, look, I think the overriding thing to remember is that neither side wants war. The Iranians, they work in decades. They have been building up their influence across the Middle East over decades. And over decades, they want to see the Americans removed from the Middle East. And they do not want that strategy to blow up overnight as it would if the Americans were to attack Iran. The same is true on the other side. The Americans, they do not want a war. President Biden in an election year does not want a massive war in the Middle East. That is something important to remember. Now, this statement tonight by Kataib Hezbollah, which is one of the militant groups operating in Iraq, backed by Iran, but it is somewhat of a maverick group. It works on its own to a large extent, albeit with Iranian weapons. They have announced tonight that they are suspending, as they say, military operations against the occupier being America. That is a remarkable statement, and I think, although we don't know, that to read between the lines, I think what has happened is that the Iraqis, the Iraqi Prime Minister and others in the region are really worried. They are worried that the Americans are going to strike back very, very hard and that all hell would break loose in their region. So I think a lot of pressure has been put on the Iranians and on these local groups to say, we need to back down. I wonder whether this attack, this drone attack at the weekend, before the weekend, whether they did not intend to kill Americans. They intended to do what they've done countless times over the course of the past few months, to strike American assets, but not to kill Americans. They were too successful. Now they're very worried. They're trying to back down. But as the Pentagon said tonight, actions speak louder than words. And domestically, Joe Biden is under a lot of pressure to retaliate.
Mark Stone, thank you. Well, extraordinary images have emerged of Israeli forces, some dressed as Palestinian women and medical staff, raiding a hospital in the occupied West Bank. 3 people were killed who Israel says were planning an attack. Our Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle has more.
The clock in the top right corner of the CCTV shows it's just before 5:45 a.m. on Tuesday morning. Undercover Israeli soldiers, men and women, have entered a hospital in Jenin in the occupied West Bank, disguised as doctors and patients. With weapons poised, they calmly walk through the hospital and towards their target. Inside this room, they executed 3 Palestinians. One appears to have been in a hospital bed. There is a bullet hole in the pillow. Blood is on the walls and floor. These are the 3 men who were killed. Israel says they were hiding in the hospital and planning an imminent October the 7th style terror attack. The IDF released this photo of a gun that they say one of the men had on him. However, according to his mother, one of the men, Basil Hazawi, was reportedly disabled and needed around-the-clock care in hospital.
They were sleeping. They sleep during the mornings. Thank God, this is the 4th month I've been in the hospital with the injured boy, and God chose them to be martyred. May God be pleased with them. May God be pleased with them.
The Israeli soldiers were reportedly in and out in just 10 minutes. The method of this operation, going into hospital disguised, has raised questions about Israel's tactics.
Supposing you go into a room, there are 3 people, and one of them's got some implement where if he presses a button, something horrible goes on. Well, yes, maybe you could justify an immediate killing of that person. If a policeman goes to arrest a person or 3 people, and there is no evidence of them fighting back, resisting, or using force against you, would he be justified in killing them? No.
The 3 men were buried in Jenin today. 58 Palestinians have now been killed in the West Bank this year, an average of almost 2 a day. Israel's war against Hamas isn't confined to just Gaza. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News in Jerusalem.
There was a warning to the UK government today over proposals to cut taxes in the upcoming budget. The International Monetary Fund said preserving high-quality public services, boosting growth and achieving net zero targets would imply higher spending. Sky's economics and data editor Ed Conway reports.
Of all the Prime Minister and Chancellor's priorities,
we can and we will cut taxes.
Now the right time for tax cuts, Chancellor.
Tax cuts are surely the most consistent and prominent.
In the autumn statement, we decisively cut taxes.
We do want to cut taxes more at future events.
But today, the world's biggest economic authority, the International Monetary Fund, warned that doing so was a bad idea.
We are projecting...
The chief economist saying that with all Britain's spending commitments in the coming years, they didn't see any room for cuts.
We would advise against further discretionary tax cuts.
At this point, you're probably wondering, what right does the IMF have to pass judgment on the UK? Well, it was all contained within their economic outlook, their latest update on the state of the global economy. And here, it wasn't just taxes. They were also looking at economic growth. This is showing you growth rates among the G7, so major economies around the world. The higher the bars are, the faster the growth. The UK was the weakest growing one, but this update, so the latest update, shows that Germany has been downgraded. UK unchanged at 0.6%, but Germany downgraded, so that is the weakest this year. Next year, the UK was kind of high up in this table, relatively high up. It has now been downgraded, so down from 2% to 1.6%. But it's those comments on taxation that are perhaps most striking. And here the point from the IMF is, this is the tax burden in the UK. The government wants to bring that down, and the fund thinks that's not very realistic. And why? It's because of spending. So this is showing you current spending, and the government's expecting spending to come down quite quickly, but the fund thinks it might stay quite high. Here's what the Chancellor has to say about it, though. He says it's too early to know whether further reductions in tax will be affordable in the budget, but we continue to believe that smart tax reductions can make a big difference in boosting growth. However, outside experts say there's simply not much room.
It's difficult to see how those pressures go away over the next 5 years. So my guess is if there are tax cuts this year, they will be undone after the next election, whoever wins that election.
No one quite knows when the election will be, but no one doubts the economy will play a part. The government's pitch is to put more money back into the public's pockets, but the IMF reckons that path simply isn't open to them. Ed Conway, Sky News.
A jury has been shown for the first time pictures of a newborn baby who died after her parents went on the run. Constance Martin and her partner Mark Gordon are accused of the manslaughter of their baby through gross negligence. Sky's Matthew Thompson reports now from the Old Bailey.
This is the first time we have laid eyes on baby Victoria. Not much more than a week old. She wouldn't live to see many more. Her parents, Constance Martin and Mark Gordon, seen here taking her out of a taxi in East London last January, are accused of her manslaughter after they spent weeks on the run. Gordon, the only one of the two present in court, had his head in his hands as the footage was played. His lawyer asked for a short break as he was finding it too stressful. A nationwide manhunt was launched after their burning car was found on a motorway near Manchester with a placenta inside. From there, the couple fled on foot to Bolton. They then went on a tour of the country, spending hundreds of pounds on taxis, first to Liverpool and then some 270 miles to Harwich in Essex. From there, they travelled to East London, where the CCTV of baby Victoria was captured, and eventually to Newhaven in Sussex, where the CCTV trail goes cold.
Where the couple were, what they were doing, and crucially, how they were treating their baby is of central importance to this case. On the one hand, the defence argues baby Victoria was well looked after throughout the couple's time on the run. The prosecution, though, alleges that it was precisely the couple's failure to care for the baby that led to her tragic death.
It would be another 7 weeks after this footage that Constance Martin and Mark Gordon were arrested. Days after that, baby Victoria was found dead in Brighton, wrapped in a shopping bag. Whether criminal or not, it was a tragic end to a life that had barely begun. Matthew Thompson, Sky News.
A convoy of hundreds of tractors have surrounded Paris, accusing the French government of ignoring the needs of farmers. They're saying that high prices of fertiliser and energy, along with overregulation, is damaging their livelihoods. The farmers are blocking the major roads heading into Paris and designating choke points to disrupt the flow of traffic. Our Europe correspondent Adam Parsons reports from there.
Through the haze of smoking flares, more tractors joined the blockade of Paris. Here we saw dozens arriving to join a column that already contained many more tractors. They have brought this motorway to a standstill. Normally a frenetic route into the nearby capital, now completely blocked. These farmers have driven their tractors more than 200 miles to get here to protest about rising costs, falling income and burdensome bureaucracy. Mathieu is a local grain farmer, angry with both his government and the red tape of the European Union.
We're applying pressure on the government and President Macron and Europe. There is no longer any harmony. The UK left Europe, and now there's talk of Ukraine joining. If we did a survey today in France, maybe the French would leave Europe.
He says cheap imports from Ukraine have hit farmers' income and lowered food standards.
We understand that Ukraine is at war and that it needs help, but we shouldn't keep accepting products that don't meet the norms.
The farmers are settling in for a long wait. There is hot food and drink here and a sense of purpose. This sign proclaims tired but still determined. For years, French farmers said that nobody had listened to their complaints. And now, well, this is what direct action looks like. Stopping roads, blockading the capital and threatening to starve the people of Paris. Paris is feeling the strain. The city's vast fresh produce market in Rungis is protected by armoured vehicles and riot police. The French government announced a list of concessions and reassurances about enforcing controls on those imports from Ukraine.
Notre agriculture est une force et notre fierté aussi.
The Prime Minister told farmers that they are the strength and pride of the nation and that they have his unwavering support. France is not alone, with farmers' protests now spreading across Europe. These in Italy and also in Belgium. Others are happening in Germany, the Netherlands and beyond. But in France, it is the image of Paris under siege that is so potent. An army of tractors is not easily ignored. Adam Parsons, Sky News, Paris.
The tech billionaire Elon Musk is mastering space travel, taking social media by storm. And now he's turned his attention to brain chips. His company Neuralink has inserted a chip into its first human patient. The aim is for the device, called telepathy, to eventually allow users with severe disabilities to communicate better. Our science and technology editor Tom Clark reports.
Imagine the joy of connecting with your loved ones, browsing the web, or even playing games using only your thoughts.
For 8 years since founding Neuralink, Elon Musk has been wanting to get inside our heads.
We think probably in about 6 months we should be able to have our first Neuralink in a human.
It took 6 months longer than that, but now Neuralink says a human volunteer has been fitted with their implant. It's designed to measure brain activity from more than 3,000 microscopic wires routed into the brain using a custom-built robot, currently aimed at helping people with spinal injuries or motor neuron disease communicate via a computer. It's not a world first. Competitors of Neuralink have already successfully demonstrated implanted brain-computer interfaces, and there are other ways to read people's minds. In this lab at Imperial College, I'm being fitted with a headset that measures my brainwaves without scalpels, even needles. So this headset is covered with an array of electrodes that are measuring the electrical activity of my brain indirectly through my skin and my skull. And it's been trained on hundreds of volunteers that are fed into an AI model over here to interpret the brain signals that correlate to motor function, the ability to move, in this case, moving my hands. So that means even a volunteer like me who's never come across this interface before can use it to play a computer game, not by actually moving my hands, just by thinking about moving my hands. The focus of this spin-out company is to help patients regain function following a stroke. And advances in AI may mean wider applications without risky surgery.
This is a very exciting field because the non-invasive technology allows for many electrodes to be on the surface of the scalp, and we get information from all of them. And using machine learning, we're able to extract that information in a different way.
Elon Musk brings determination, endless wealth and hype to brain science. But animal and human trials bring ethical and technical hurdles that make self-driving cars and rocket science look easy. Tom Clark, Sky News.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we are joined by the journalist and broadcaster Jenny Kleeman and the broadcaster and commentator Ali Miraj. Welcome to both of you. Well, among the stories we will be discussing, this on the front of the Financial Times, the headline, that warning to the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt not to cut taxes in his spring budget. That and plenty more when we come back. Well, this is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. First, though, a reminder of our top stories this evening. Northern Ireland is set for a Sinn Fein First Minister after unionists agreed a deal to return to power sharing. Footage has emerged showing Israeli troops dressed as civilians and doctors killing 3 people in a hospital in the West Bank. Israel says they were militants planning an attack. And the International Monetary Fund has warned the Chancellor not to cut taxes as it's lowered its forecast for the UK economy. Hello there, watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the journalist and broadcaster, Jenny Kleeman, and the broadcaster and commentator, Ali Miraj. Welcome to both of you. So as ever, let's take a look at the front pages first of all. And on the day that a deal to return to devolved government in Northern Ireland has been agreed, we start with the unionists supporting Belfast Telegraph and a message from DUP leader Sir Geoffrey Donaldson to sceptical colleagues, deal with it. The Financial Times reports that the International Monetary Fund has downgraded the UK economy and advised the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, against cutting taxes. The Times, meanwhile, says Mr Hunt has told his party that there is little room for big tax cuts. The Eye says the Foreign Secretary, Lord Cameron, didn't get Downing Street approval for his recent comments about a possible two-state solution to the Israel-Hamas conflict, words that were interpreted as a major shift in UK attitudes. The Telegraph reporting that Britain is now ready to send an aircraft carrier to the Red Sea to help combat Iran-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen who've been attacking shipping there. The Guardian has been speaking to medical experts who say the state of the NHS should now be declared as a national emergency. The Express has been speaking to the Home Secretary, James Cleverly, who tells the paper that tough new immigration rules will stop the UK population soaring to 74 million by 2036. The Daily Mail has seen documents which reveal that discredited BBC journalist Martin Bashir blamed racism for the scandal over his interview with Princess Diana in 1995. The Metro says the age of the cyborg has finally dawned after a medical firm run by Elon Musk implanted a chip in the brain of a patient designed to help them regain the use of their limbs. And it's the same lead for the Daily Star with the headline, Rise of the Cyborgs. Well, a reminder, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers for yourself while you listen to our guests. So let's head straight to them, to Jenny Kleeman and Ali Miraj. And Jenny, we're going to kick off actually with the Daily Mail. It's just dropping actually now, all of this information, a Freedom of Information request, which has led Martin Bashir, we found out, to blame racism, his background and professional jealousy, we're told, for those accusations about his interview with Princess Diana.
Yes, there was a Freedom of Information request relating to emails that were sent in 2020 when this was being discussed. You have to remember also that this was being discussed for many, many years, the idea that he secured his interview with Princess Diana using faked documents that made her feel that there was an urgency, that she was being betrayed, that made her perhaps not trust her staff, which might have contributed to the decisions that she took that led her to be in Paris without a kind of royal escort to look after her. But that's another that's another iteration of all of this. The revelations here are that Martin Bashir said that as a second-generation migrant, he was basically being treated in a different way than a dynastic journalist such as Dimbleby would have been treated. And that he says he's sorry to hear that this so-called forgery story has reared its head again. It played no part in the interview. And that has been shown to not be correct. You have to remember, in a lot of the coverage of all of this, the Times has also been covering this today. The papers who grab hold of this story most vociferously are the ones who are very against the BBC. The Times has been saying that BBC has spent £150,000 trying to block the release of these emails under FOI. I don't think there's any question that Martin Bashir is discredited. He certainly secured this interview in a way that no reputable journalist would do. You don't lie to get contributors on side, and he used forged documents in which to do so. He's saying it was because of racism. He's already discredited.
Yes, this all came from a journalist, Andy Webb, who put in a Freedom of Information request some 2 years ago. Lengthy statement from the BBC to answer some of those criticisms that you mentioned that the Times has been reporting. They say throughout this process we have taken our responsibilities to comply with the directions of the tribunal extremely seriously. Therefore, we've today released approximately 3,000 documents, some 10,000 pages, to Mr Webb. This latest disclosure includes many hundreds of pages of duplicates and material that was not related to the 1995 panorama, but was nevertheless caught up by these electronic searches. The BBC provided all relevant documentation. Well, I mean, it goes on. Anyway, the point is they're justifying why they've taken time to do this. I guess that's the point, isn't it?
Yes, and they know that they have many critics who will make a lot out of the fact that they have taken time to do this, taken time to release all of this. I mean, it's a very sorry affair. It was such a massive interview. It was the making of Martin Bashir. He went on to leave the BBC and become one of the highest paid journalists in the world when he went to the US, off the back of this interview, of this scoop, and then returned to the BBC. And, you know, this is just another revelation that is going to cause the BBC harm, regardless of the fact that he used forged documents to get this interview with Diana, Princess of Wales. Now he's saying that the reason why it was brought up again was because of racism.
Yes, and one further bit from that BBC statement. We have also accepted and apologised when errors have been made and taken extensive steps to rectify those errors. Shall we move on, Ali?
Yes, let's move on.
If you don't mind, let's go to the
please.
Belfast Telegraph then, if we can. Deal with it. Sir Geoffrey Donaldson faces down naysayers prior to an agreement being published. We await this detail, don't we? And its implications, which are very interesting.
Well, we do await the detail. It's going to apparently come out later this week. And we know that Sir Geoffrey Donaldson was in a 5-hour meeting with his party members last night. And a lot of it was being leaked in real time, including the fact that it was being leaked. That was also leaked as well. So it was... Look, the good thing is for the people of Northern Ireland that the Stormont Assembly is going to be back. That is a very positive move. But I do think that if you now see that Sinn Fein are going to, for the first time in Stormont's history, have a First Minister from their party and also are sitting quite pretty in what could be the next Republic of Ireland elections as well. You could have Mary Lou McDonald and Michelle O'Neill. I think the DUP will come to rue the day that it supported Brexit, because what on earth were the DUP thinking about a border? I mean, there was going to have to be a border somewhere. It was either going to be in the Irish Sea, it was going to be on the island of Ireland. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to work that one out,
So then you have two parts of the UK, the SNP in Scotland, notwithstanding a general election, of course. You have Northern Ireland, possibly Ireland, as you said, run by Sinn Fein, but who knows?
Yes.
You've got these large parts of the UK who want independence from the UK,
Yes.
Jenny.
Yes, I mean, it's an extraordinary thing. You're going to have a First Minister of Northern Ireland who's an Irish nationalist and who does not wish to belong to the country in which the place that she's governing belongs. It's a very big deal. It's not a done deal yet, though. We don't know what the details of the deal are. The two
what is the EU given up?
What is the EU given up, or what has the UK government provided? Because we know that there's over £3 billion supposedly of public funding that has gone towards public services.
Anything, though, Jenny. I mean, we're going to find out. Maybe what we're going to find out is that Sir Geoffrey Donaldson had nowhere to go anymore.
Well, yes, exactly. This is the thing. Either some miraculous rabbit has been pulled out of a hat, or Sir Geoffrey Donaldson has it's a PR thing for him, that he has to show that he has achieved something. I mean, these are the two biggest issues, constitutional issues, that have faced our country over recent decades: Brexit and Northern Ireland, all combined in this one deal about this one issue about whether or not we can deal with having a border in the Irish Sea.
It will be a coup for Rishi Sunak in the sense that the hard man of Brexit, Lord Frost, who keeps writing articles in the Daily Telegraph saying that what a sellout Rishi Sunak is, was the one who negotiated the Northern Ireland Protocol that led to the hard border in the Irish Sea. And these people have got no shame.
Yeah. Yes. And just one final thought about the rest of the UK's relationship with the European Union. You know, will Northern Ireland remain a special case because of the circumstances of that border and the Good Friday Agreement? Or will it actually mean closer alignment with the European Union, just at a time when the UK starts to put its proper border controls in, which will make exports from the EU to the UK harder later this month.
One of the reasons why this isn't a done deal is it has to be agreed in Westminster, and there are, hardline Brexiteers who will not accept anything that brings the UK closer to the EU, who will see it as a capitulation. So, this is loyalists have to accept this, and also Brexiteers have to accept it. So, it's great news, particularly for Northern Ireland, which has huge problems. Longest waiting lists in the UK. Really could do with some proper government.
Absolutely.
But it's not a done deal.
Yes, and there, Michelle O'Neill, First Minister designate, the SDLP pointed out that actually, she can't even agree the purchase of paperclips without the deputy, who will be from the DUP. Yes. And in fact, they should be named Joint First Minister.
But it's symbolic.
Which would be, absolutely, absolutely that, right, let's move on to the Financial Times. The IMF. Mr Hunt warned against tax cuts in the spring budget. So is this an organisation that has overstepped the sovereignty of a nation and its finances?
Well, the Brexiteers would love to say that. They always like to have a pop at the IMF. Look, the IMF is a serious international organisation. Its chief economist is essentially saying now is not the time for tax cuts. There's a time and a place, now's not it. What you should be trying to do is to try and engage in fiscal consolidation, in English meaning, try and reduce your debt and actually invest in public services. That's what you should be trying to do. And you've got very, very low productivity. Some would call it woeful productivity for the best part of 15 years in this country. And our growth this year is going to be the miraculous total of 0.6% and 1.6% next year. So we've got a really bleak economic backdrop. And on the back of this, Jeremy Hunt he's got the right wing of his party nipping at his heels saying, we want really aggressive tax cuts. You've got 20 billion or whatever fiscal headroom. We don't know what the number is. But now he's sort of beginning to row back from this saying, might not be able to give you what I thought I might be able to give you because there's simply not enough money around.
Yeah, well, the Times, we'll bring the Times in while you're talking, actually. But, this is so confusing for people because the whole point of interest rates is to suppress spending and squash prices. And now tax cuts are supposed to drive growth, which involves spending, doesn't it, from consumers?
Absolutely. Obviously, Jeremy Hunt is dealing with the right wing of his party that wants tax cuts, particularly to just have something going into the next election. And yet, there was a poll last week, a YouGov poll in the Times, which found that in every voting group, a majority of the public wants public spending to be prioritised over tax cuts. It's not that we're all clamouring for tax cuts. We all know, and we were going to go on and talk about this, about the NHS being on its knees. We're all feeling that things in this country are not working properly. And this idea that this is the greatest vote winner and we're all clamouring for it is not borne out by the polls.
Yes, and actually Jeremy Hunt seems to agree with the IMF in some regards. Jeremy Hunt has warned his cabinet that tax cuts in the spring budget may be smaller than expected because of major structural weaknesses in the economy, which is some of the things you were talking about. So perhaps it'll be another damp squib.
Well, he's already given 20 billion with this 2% reduction in national insurance.
Which came in at the beginning of Jan.
Exactly, which didn't really land. We haven't heard much about it. People have just sort of banked that and moved on.
But they've only just had it in, people have only just had it in their salaries.
True, but I think that the Tory party is in such a dire situation at the moment that it could do whatever it wants to do, quite frankly. It could slash inheritance tax, it could slash any tax it wanted to, and it would still struggle to actually make any sort of dent whatsoever because people are just tired. Now, I'm a tax cutter. I believe in low taxes, but at the right time. Yeah. This is not the right time. We spent 400 billion on COVID. We've got 2.5 trillion of public debt to contend with. Now is the time to actually be trying to be a bit more sensible, pay down your debt, and also try and invest in public services where you've got NHS waiting lists of 7.7 million, for heaven's sake.
And also you're in a situation where the tax cuts that have already been, people are not feeling them massively. It's a few £100s a year. And what is the benefit of that in terms of voters and how voters are feeling? Yeah. A few extra £100 a year when you have public services in such a dire situation.
Got loads more to pack in with those late stories breaking. So coming to a break, a panel of experts recommends the state of the NHS be declared a national emergency. We will discuss that and more after this break.
and has rallied. Moderation, interest rates peaking.
And up at 6%.
The highest for 14 years.
Will that be the peak? Will it be a little bit lower?
Crisis. It's closer to a potential crash.
So many words, so many meanings. But what do they mean for you and your finances? Stay up to date on Sky News.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
It's turning everybody into, a crazy, violent drug addict.
How are you feeling? I am angry.
It is an anti-woman agenda.
2 women say that you paid for their abortions. Are you a hypocrite, sir? Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
I gotta be realistic. My sister's dead.
More than 4 weeks on, there's no murder weapon and no suspect. Are you going to catch this killer?
We are doing everything we can.
Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
They're so excited.
Severe nightmares of these people coming in and just taking me in the middle of the night.
I've watched as whole towns were torn apart by natural disaster.
I'm alive and I'm thankful for that, but there are a lot of people who aren't.
It's not the winds people fear most here, it's the water. We take you to the heart of the stories which shape our world. Do you truly believe what you're saying?
A lot of cases that I know are reported from Ukrainian missiles themselves.
Ambassador, with respect, I think that's preposterous. Well, welcome back. You are watching the press preview, joined once again by Jenny Kleeman and Ali Mirage. Welcome back to both of you. So let's go to David Cameron. Has given hope to the Palestinians, talking about a two-state solution once again, Ali. And yet the Eye is suggesting that he did not clear this speech with number 10.
Yeah, this is a speech that the Foreign Secretary, Lord Cameron, gave to Arab ambassadors yesterday. And this is talking about a recognition for a Palestinian state, because he's deeply concerned about this whole issue of the two-state solution being kicked into the long grass, to put it politely, by Netanyahu and his government, and also by Hamas, quite frankly. They don't want a two-state solution either. So Cameron wants to push the issue. The Eye is saying that this wasn't cleared by number 10. Number 10 has been very foursquare behind Israel. But the interesting thing is that even number 10 and the government are going to have to work out what their position is, because it's becoming increasingly clear that the Israelis have got no truck whatsoever in recognizing a Palestinian state. And beyond that, there was a rally that happened in Israel only over the weekend about effectively ethnically cleansing the Gazans from their homeland. And it just actually smacks of, in a situation where a lot of people were very sympathetic to Israel, like me, after the October the 7th attacks and believed they had a right to self-defense, are now beginning to think, hang on a second, when people say that they want to forcibly remove people from their homes, look what's happening in the West Bank, and people are glorifying this, and 10 members of the government are attending this rally, you do think this is not doing Israel any favours whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, Israel absolutely categorically denies that, but the US has criticised those members of the cabinet who have joined in with that. Let's move on to The Guardian, if we can. As I said, lots to pack in, which is the state of the NHS should be declared a national emergency, Jenny.
Yes, there is a commission of experts who have been assembled by the British Medical Journal who says that they have said that because record numbers of patients are being denied, emergency, timely cancer treatment. More than 200,000 people in England have not received potentially life-saving surgery. They're saying the next government needs to declare that the NHS is in a state of national emergency, which, you know, we all know that the NHS is broken, that at the moment it is not working. But these numbers are particularly shocking. 222,577 people did not begin treatment between 62 days between January 2020, just before COVID struck, and last November. These are people with cancer. This is terrible. This is, you know, this is really, really shocking.
Yeah, and just moving on to the last story, sorry to rush you. The dawn of the cyborg, it's in the Metro and the Daily Star. Well, I've only left you 10 seconds, Ali. It's not really possible. It's a rather complicated story in that, is it? Really?
Well, it's going to transform everything. I mean, if people can actually, if this technology can actually read what you're thinking and actually move your limbs accordingly, I mean, this is the dawn of a new age.
Would you trust Elon Musk to put a chip in your brain, given what he's done to Twitter?
Probably not. But, you know, if it helps people who actually, you know, can't move their limbs, you know, who am I to say?
OK, we didn't get to the changing of the day of leap year. All to come, obviously. Jenny Kleeman, Ali Mirage, thank you. See you for the 11. Here's the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
So wet and windy conditions will sweep into Scotland overnight, with rain spreading south through the day. Yellow wind warnings are in place for the northern half of the country, with storm force winds expected in the far north and gusts in excess of 50 miles an hour for northern England. Bulk of the country, though, will be dry overnight. A frost in areas where skies are clear. In the lighter winds in the south, some patchy mist and fog.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Press Preview continues at the 11, rather. More reaction and analysis as the DUP agrees a deal that could see the return of power sharing in Northern Ireland.